The New York Islanders have a pair of top four defensemen who are eligible to sign contract extensions this offseason. But which one of them should they prioritize and what should they do about both? We've got all that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We have got a lot to discuss on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could also follow the show on X at Locked On Isles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long during the offseason. That means hirings, firings, trade rumors, the draft, free agency, and anything else happening to New York Islanders. And it's always great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or any time. So I wanted to start today off discussing contract extensions. And I know the Islanders are eager to create cap space and, make it possible for this team to add some younger, faster, and more skilled players to this lineup. We need a couple of top six forwards, preferably wingers. We've talked, and Lou Lamoriello has admitted for more than a year, we need another puck-moving defenseman, ideally, to add to the mix. But even when you want to do those things, you have to take into consideration which players on your current roster do you want to re-sign and what will it cost to re-sign them. And this offseason, starting July 1st, so less than a month away, the New York Islanders have two defensemen who are eligible to basically sign some kind of an extension and get locked up for longer contracts. And those two players are Noah Dobson, who signed a team-friendly bridge deal for $4 million a year and has 1 year left on that deal, and Alexander Romanov, who has 1 year left on his bridge contract that paid him $2.5 million a year. Now, both of these guys are in the top two pairings, and it depends. We know Patrick Waugh has mixed and matched his defense pairings often within the course of a single game, but almost all the time, 99% of the time, both Alexander Romanov and Noah Dobson are in the top two pairs of defensemen, not the third pair. And we know Romanov will get time on the PK, Dobson extensively. He is the quarterback of the top power play unit most of the time. Clearly Dobson is much more of an offensive threat, having scored, 70 points this year. First time an Islanders defenseman has done that since Dennis Potvin did it. And Potvin, as you know, retired in the mid to late 80s. So, Dobson making a big deal. And then Romanov, who was a team best plus 23, who was second on the team in block shots behind Noah Dobson, by the way, who had 157 hits, which was tops among Islanders defensemen by 58. The next highest defenseman had 99 hits, and that was Ryan Pollock. So here are two guys who are clearly important and valuable to your team. And they are eligible as of July 1st, which begins the final year of their current deal, to sign extensions. And I think the urgency, obviously, with Dobson is higher because even though Noah Dobson does have his struggles in the defensive zone, and every day, as you know, we've talked about that, there are not a lot of defensemen in the National Hockey League who are capable of scoring 70 points or more a year. And I still get the feeling there's another level that Dobson might be able to go to, that he can go from 70 points maybe to 75 or 80, especially if he improves on the power play with his hockey sense and just the way he does things. I don't think he's quite reached his ceiling yet, although he's getting close. So I think Dobson has to be the priority. And if you're talking about bringing in a player, regardless of who you're talking about, whether it's Nikolai Ehlers, whether it's, Martin Necas, whoever it is you want to bring in to give the Islanders that extra goal scorer. Yeah, both Romanov and Dobson are under contract for this year. But after that, hopefully the cap continues to go up, but you got to pay those two guys if you want to keep them, and you have to be able to fit whoever you bring in under the cap. And this is, I think, again, the big reason why giving long-term deals to bottom six forwards and bottom pair defensemen with no trade clauses or modified no trade clauses, or having so many guys on this roster whose salary exceeds their production, whose cap hit exceeds their production, that's where it hurts the team, because you can't easily improve a team that is right now at best a fringe playoff club. So I think you prioritize Dobson, but I don't think you want to lose Romanov. Romanov is physical. He is, solid in his own zone most of the time. I know the Islanders as a team have struggled. And I know with Dobson, like I said, he has his defensive zone lapses, but that production offensively is so hard to come by that you don't want to lose a guy like that. Now, I get the feeling that Dobson is going to get $7-8 million a year, something in that range, maybe even 8.5. If you want to lock him up to a 7-year, 5, 6, 7-year deal, and both these guys are at the age where you can do that. I don't think that's the issue right now. I mean, both players are 24, 25 years old. So you lock them up for 7 years. That takes you to 32, roughly. That's the prime of their career. 24 to 32, that's prime. So, Dobson will probably cost you between $7 and $8.5 million a year. Romanov, you probably could get for $5 to $6 million a year. But again, you want to strike sooner rather than later, because salaries in the NHL tend not to go down. And if the cap does continue to go up, while that does give you a little more wiggle room to work with, you also still, the salaries go up as the cap goes up. And so a top productive offensive defenseman, while you could probably sign him for one number now, the price will only go up next year and the year after, and you don't want to risk losing him. Same thing with Romanov, even though he's more of a shutdown defenseman at this, point in his career, more of a defensive-oriented guy, the cost of a quality top 4 shutdown defenseman or solid defensive defenseman only goes up each year as new contracts get signed and new guys get paid. And even if, if a player who isn't as good as Noah Dobson's contract comes up and he gets a deal worth $7.5 million, his agent, Dauber's agent, is going to say, hey, so-and-so is getting $7.5 million. And my client scored more points, played more games, had more assists, had more ice time per game. My guy's worth more. And to lose Dobson and or Romanov to free agency, the way they ended up, having to trade away Devon Taves or, deal players that they didn't want to deal or lose players they didn't want to lose in free agency, you just don't want to let that happen. So it'll be interesting to see how Lou Lamoriello plays it. I think they will sign Dobson to a new deal this offseason. Romanov, I think they'll get it done some point before the end of the 2024-2025 season, but one step at a time. We have to see what Lou Lamoriello does. And again, you don't want a situation where you're handcuffing the team based on the kind of contracts you're dealing out. So we'll see. Tough one. Decision time for the New York Islanders, and hopefully they are able to make a good deal with both of these players to keep them on the island for the foreseeable future. All right, we've got a lot more to discuss on today's show. We're going to talk a little bit about righting a big wrong on this team. Pat LaFontaine should be in the Islanders Hall of Fame. We'll continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Hudson Fasching, and for our Islanders birthday of the day, a forward who was with the Islanders for most of the 90s and enjoyed a couple of 20-plus goal seasons with the team. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to spend on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Islander fans, I know most of you are probably happy that the Rangers have been eliminated, that Kyle Oposo is going to the Stanley Cup Final. But use your knowledge of the NHL on FanDuel. Check out the odds and prop bets for the Stanley Cup Finals. You can bet on any game. You can bet on who's going to win the Cup. You can bet on who's going to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. Check out all the odds at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Pat LaFontaine and righting a wrong. Pat LaFontaine in the Hockey Hall of Fame, deserved after a 15-year NHL career, had more than 1,000 points in a little over 865 games. And look, his career ended when he was in his early 30s because of concussions, and that was obviously a shame. But Pat LaFontaine, a great Islander and a player who, unfortunately, because of some falling out between him and some past ownership groups, is not in the Islanders Hall of Fame. And, LaFontaine probably as of now, the best Islanders player post dynasty. And he literally came in at the end of the dynasty. He was the Islanders' first pick, third overall pick in the 1983 draft, joined the Islanders after the 1984 Olympics, where he represented the United States, and then scored 13 goals and 19 points in 15 games. Was a part of the team that went to the Stanley Cup final in 1984 at the, he was 18 at this point, and he was already playing at an extremely high level. They didn't win the cup, lost to Edmonton, and then he was the Islanders' best player from, let's say, the mid 80s until he left the team after the 1990-91 season. He had a 54 goal season in 1989-90 and 105 points. He had he had 4 straight years with the Islanders of 40 goals or more. 47 in 87-88, 45 in 88-89. I mentioned the 54 in 89-90, and then 41 goals in 1990-91, and yet money was an issue. Ownership was not paying its players at that point once they got good, something that really plagued the Islanders organization in the 90s, that money was tight for much of that decade. And, he was traded to Buffalo in a deal that left a lot of a bad taste in the mouths of a lot of Islanders fans, and certainly with Pat LaFontaine. And then ownership had issues with, LaFontaine and ownership. Now, at this point, he still went on to a great career in Buffalo and then closed out his career with the Rangers briefly before, like I said, concussions ended it. But it is time. It is time for the New York Islanders to kind of right that wrong. And basically, LaFontaine recently did an interview, and he said, when asked about the Islanders Hall of Fame by Peter Schwartz, he said, "I don't think about it a lot, but I'm grateful for my years here on Long Island, grateful for the fans. This is home. I root for the team. I wish them well, and I support them." And, he added, "I just want to see them win a Stanley Cup again. No matter what, Long Island is home for me." Well, I'll tell you, the good news is LaFontaine has been back at alumni events that the ownership group, say what you want about Malkin and Ledecky, as far as, them giving a little too much faith in Lou Lamoriello, but it is time. It is time to have Pat LaFontaine inducted into the New York Islanders Hall of Fame. He deserves it based on everything he's done, both on the ice and off the ice, as far as his contributions to the community and all the charity events. And look, is there a more memorable moment post dynasty than the game-winning goal in the Easter epic scored by Pat LaFontaine against the Washington Capitals in quadruple overtime of Game 7 of that playoff series? That is one of the greatest games in Islanders history, probably one of the great games in NHL playoff history. And, LaFontaine, the man, belongs in the Islanders Hall of Fame. Once you get past the dynasty years, I mean, LaFontaine's on the short list, okay? You want to talk about, some other players who belong in the Hall of Fame. Okay, yeah, they're there, but I don't think that there are too many other players who played for this team after the dynasty years were over and basically are not in the Hall of Fame, but belong in the Hall of Fame. I mean, look, there are some great players in the Islanders Hall of Fame who are not as good as Pat LaFontaine. And that's not you know, to say that it's an offense to these guys, but you know, he's in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. It is time for Pat LaFontaine to be honored by the New York Islanders. And, look, no offense to Bob Bourne and Pat Flatley and John Tonelli. Those are all Ed Westfall, all of them great Islanders. But if it's a choice between them and Pat LaFontaine, be pretty tough to not have LaFontaine included in that group. All right, we have got more to get to. Let's hope Islanders management listens to this and rights that wrong, brings in LaFontaine for a night to induct him into the Islanders Hall of Fame. I'd love to see it. When we come back, we continue our player-by-player review of the Islanders season. We have Hudson Fasching, plus our Islanders birthday of the day, and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. So we continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders as we begin week 4 of these player-by-player reviews. And if you missed one, you could certainly go back and review all of them. But today, Hudson Fasching. Fasching, now 28. He will turn 29 in July. And this really was his second kind of full NHL season, and it was a disappointing one, I have to say, for Hudson Fasching. Played 45 games, 4 goals, 14 points, and a -7 plus-minus. Only had 6 penalty minutes, but all of his points obviously coming at even strength. He had 41 shots on goal in 45 games. That's down from 61 shots in 49 games a year ago. Played a little more than 12 minutes per game ice time. Blocked 31 shots. That number is up. Recorded 40 hits. I think more than anybody, I think Hudson Fasching missed the presence of Zach Parise. I think Parise was a mentor for Hudson Fasching, and they had good chemistry together on that third line. Not this past season, but 2022, 2023. Parise left, and for whatever reason, Pajot and Fasching just couldn't find that niche of where they wanted to be that helped them have good chemistry. Fasching, when he did play, I think played his best hockey, actually, when he was filling in on the fourth line, whether it was because players were injured or whether he was needed there. He occasionally tried to move up into the top 2 lines, but again, it just didn't make a lot of sense for him to be a top 6 forward, and that's not meant to be an affront to Hudson Fasching. I think he is, you can put a guy like that in there on a very short-term basis, but, Hudson Fasching at most is probably about a 12 to 15 goal a year guy in a fourth or third line role. He can be physical. He can be responsible defensively, but he's got to be more consistent. And I think he's got to get back to basics. Going forward, I think Hudson Fasching will be in training camp. He has one more year left on that 2-year deal that he signed with the Islanders a year ago. And, look, he's only making $775,000. So it's not like he's breaking the bank here. He can give you something on that bottom 6. And, we don't know the status right now of either Matt Martin or Cal Clutterbuck, whether either of them will be back. But I think Fasching is back next year, probably playing a fourth line role, probably going to be more physical and hopefully more consistent. And he's got to keep his game simple, and he's got to get, the job done that he did more consistently the previous season when he really was a pleasant surprise for the New York Islanders. And, Fasching, like we said, not young at this point. He needs to just prove that he can be an everyday NHLer. He was a healthy scratch a little more often, obviously, than he would have liked, let alone, the Islanders. So hopefully we see more of a better season from Hudson Fasching in 2024, 2025. It's not going to be easy. He's going to have to win a job on the team. At the very least, I expect him to be one of the 13th or 14th forwards that the team is going to carry over the course of the season, even if he's not in the lineup every day. Time now for our Islanders' birthday of the day. And Sunday was the 54th birthday of former Islanders winger Marty McGinnis, the Weymouth, Massachusetts native, 3 seasons at Boston College, drafted by the Islanders in the 8th round in 1988, played his first game with the Islanders in 91-92, and was with the team through the trade deadline at the 96-97 season, later played with the Flames, the Ducks, and the Boston Bruins before retiring after the 02-03 season. Had a career high 25 goals and 56 points in 1993-94 with the Islanders, top 20 goals with the Islanders again in 96-97, 70 games, then was dealt to the Flames where he had 3 more goals in 10 games, so he had 23 goals that year. Later had a 20-goal year for the Ducks, but overall, McGinnis, a solid middle six kind of a forward, can give you, 15 to 25 goals a year and play steadily defensively. 796 career NHL games, 170 goals, 420 points, 330 penalty minutes, had 3 goals, 5 points in 22 playoff games, 7 of them and 1 assist with the Islanders. He was an assistant coach at Boston College from 2013 to 2020, so McGinnis did stay active in hockey after his playing days were done. One of his better games as an Islander, how about February 22nd, 1996, Islanders visiting the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. Tommy Soderstrom, the goalie for the Islanders, Glenn Healy, the goalie for the Rangers. And in this game, Marty McGinnis opens the scoring midway through the first period from Martin Straka and Rich Pilon. That made it 1-0 Islanders. With the game tied at 1 in the second, McGinnis sets up Martin Straka to give the Islanders a 2-1 lead. Wendell Clark, the other assist. And then in the third period, early on, McGinnis scores his second of the game, 8th of the year. Wendell Clark, the assist. The Islanders go on to beat the Rangers by a score of 5-3. And for Marty McGinnis in this game, 2 goals, 1 assist. He was a +3, and he had 4 shots on goal, which did lead the Islanders. And yes, he had the game winner, 33 saves for Tommy Soderstrom in this one. So Islanders beating the Rangers at the Garden by a score of 5-3. And Marty McGinnis is our Islanders' birthday of the day. Wanted to mention one other thing. We're trying to set up a little watch party for one of the games of the Stanley Cup Finals. Not obviously live at the game, but at a sports bar. So again, if you're interested in attending and joining me and some of our regular viewers and listeners, I will put the link in the show notes to express your interest, but it's lockedonislanders.wordpress.com. And again, the link will be in the show notes. And if you can be there, I'd love to see you, and we could talk some hockey and enjoy one of the games of the Stanley Cup Final. And it's always fun to to just enjoy some hockey with fellow Islander fans. So thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day, everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, we continue our player-by-player look at the New York Islanders. We're going to talk a little Bo Horvat tomorrow, so make sure you join us for that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.